Welcome back. Third and final part of our newspaper review. Keep your tweets coming in, of course, at K24 TV. Just before we took the break, of course, we're talking about the likelihood of impeachment of the deputy president and what this would really mean moving forward. You had a comment on that before we move on?
I did. One of the things I needed to say is that the president had good intentions on the handshake. But unfortunately, ODM have prostituted on the handshake. And what they want to do is to see who has the disproportionate power. They are pushing us into ethnic tensions. And that ethnic tension is weakening us in terms of geopolitics. There's so much political risk in this country that now our neighbors are taking advantage of us as we go.
Let's talk about that. Let's actually talk about that even as we go into matters regional politics. We had a delegation going to, talk to President Farmajo over the weekend. CS Matiang'i leading this particular delegation, and very many people asking, wouldn't this be the role CS Foreign Affairs should have taken? What didn't we see on this particular scenario, even as they went for this particular talk that took place, Bwana Justice?
I have no problem with CS Matiang'i being in charge of that because it's more of security than anything else. Mm-hmm. And sometimes a president can designate anybody, including even the CS water, to represent. If it is a message from the president, right, anybody can be able to can be given that responsibility. So to me, I have no problem with CS Matiang'i being in charge of that delegation. Two, like my colleagues have said off camera, there is always the challenge of the Somali and Kenya in terms of we have had hate, a kind of lukewarm relationship, and of course the challenge at the moment is that there is an impending election in Somalia, and I think the president has wanted to use the issue of territorial integrity in Somalia to boost his capacity to be elected as the president of Somalia in the coming elections. Then again, of course, we have got our troops in Somalia, and where also that there have been a lot of stories about what could be happening in Somalia with our troops, and I think you have read a lot on the kind of allegations against our officers in Somalia. I know they are doing a good job, but again, once in a while you see the international press, profiling our officers, our soldiers in Somalia, and of course, again, there is slowly but steadily the kind of resentment towards our officers, our soldiers in Somalia by the Somalis, and that of course they feel like this is an invading army, and that I think needs to be addressed at that level of the president. Most likely, I would even wish they escalate that problem, and then maybe the two presidents meet. Again, the issue of the international borders in the deep sea. Of course, they have taken Kenya to is it ICC? ICJ. Mm-hmm. Then it's a very complicated. The relationship between Kenya is one that I do not envisage that the current government will be able to deal. In fact, to me, I would imagine that us and Somalis will always have a problem for as long as Kenya will be a country, and of course, because to really demarcate, other than the physical boundary, you may not really demarcate. It's only the physical, but in terms of our Kenyan Somalis and the Somalis, there is a kind of there is a joint, there is a lot of collaborative nature between the Kenyan Somalis and the Somalis in Somalia. So that complicates the issue, and that is why whenever you bring the issue of the problem of Somali, and Kenya, you feel like there are a number of leaders within the country who are sympathetic to the agenda of Somalis as opposed to the agenda of the Kenyan government. Okay. So that complicates the matter.
Nerima, we're talking about a delegation that has gone over the weekend to speak matter security, of course, over what happened to the 11 MPs, but also at a regional level, we still have, like he said, this dagger hanging over our heads with the maritime dispute that's going on. So how do we try and defrost this relationship that we have? Because it's gone on for a while. We've tried to have bilateral talks on this particular issue. By the time they took it to the ICJ, clearly all is not well between us and our neighbors. How do we deal with this? Because it seems like this is a band-aid to a much bigger problem.
It is. It's a lot more complicated. Also considering, in terms of our historic relations, we can talk about even the corruption cases that have been involved within Somalia, the number of troops that we have within AMISOM, or we can even mention the fact that perhaps our government supported a warlord in Somalia. And these are things that we will have to deal with, because now we're talking about a majority youth population which is going to continue to increase. We are here trying to have the conversation about regional development growth. Even if we're talking about not just the East Africa community, we also have to understand how the countries that border us work, because we're becoming more fluid in a global market. And what does that mean? Because there's a very many individuals who live within Kenya or Nairobi who have businesses in Somalia. And so we're interconnected, and it's the same vice versa. So it's something that I believe we cannot get away from without dealing with past injustices, because there are also parts within our history that we do not understand. If we're to be frank, we do not even understand the northeastern region as a country, as a public, as individuals. It's not really taught in our history. We don't understand what the tribes are, and there's no particular interest. And even when we had a lot of terror attacks and a time when, to be frank with you, within our own borders, Kenyan citizens who are born and raised in Kenya would not have access to identity cards. And even when you just walk nearby here in Eastleigh, it's the same thing. People who've been born and raised in Kenya, in Nairobi, don't have identity cards. So I believe that there are a lot of issues in terms of historical injustices that we haven't come to terms with. And if we were to build this relationship between the two countries, then our governments have to also be open to one another and to learning from each other and treating each other as equal. Because we clearly understand that the communities are marginalized, but it doesn't mean that they are going to be less marginalized by pumping more resources to these particular counties. Because I remember that there was a time where there was a push where county governments that are considered a SAL region would receive much more resources in terms of counties. Then before you know it, other counties started to say they are also part of the SAL.
Right.
Yeah, so when we have issues such as that propping up, then it can be very difficult for us to have affirmative action in terms of having a better cohesion between the communities within our country and also those that neighbor our borders as well.
Fred, we had the 11 MPs who went to President Farmajo. They had a meeting with him. They said they did not meet anyone else. And when they came back, they even said they actually had a message from the president to our own president, President Uhuru Kenyatta, a goodwill message. So they said they've been questioned. It hasn't gone further than that. Do you feel that there was more to that particular meeting, and probably that meeting has led to what we have now with CS Matiang'i going there?
I think diplomatic relations are key in terms of protecting the interest of different countries. And countries work together to achieve goals that they each set. Our relationship with Somalia hasn't been bad because we have got joint efforts. President Uhuru Kenyatta and President Farmajo are all working towards fighting the emergence of Al-Shabaab. So on that note alone, our relationship has been good. We all want to fight terror, and I think the president has done a good job on that front. Our troops in Somalia have done a fantastic job. They continue to do a fantastic job. They protect the borders. But the president, as I said earlier, has got an authority. That authority gives him the power to protect or to promote the principles of national security. Remember, the president is the chairperson of the National Security Council in this country. And therefore, the orders he gives on that capacity alone, other than being the president. So the issue that happened in Somalia, the legislators who went, first of all, the clearance should have been done. I want to believe it was done by the employer or where they work at the parliament. Number two, I also want to believe that if they met President Farmajo and they have a goodwill message to the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, then they must have delivered it through means that they know best. But I think the issues that are happening in the northern part of the country are beyond just insecurity. In our constitution, we have what is called Equalization Fund, Article 204, that was meant, and I think Nerima has talked about it, was meant to bring at par all regions, especially the regions that I felt to be marginalized in the northern part, to bring them at par together with the other regions in the country. And that fund is meant for specific function. Number one is to ensure that there's electricity, there's water, and those other basic needs. But here is a case of insecurity, a lot of insecurity. Today you go to northern Kenya, gunshots are normal. I saw when there were gunshots, when the media reported the other day, Jubaland, next Mandera, I don't know what, you could see women and children just walking, but running a bit then walking. And to us, that is very scary. But look at them, they're used to those things. But we cannot say they're used to. We must fix it now because it is a threat to this country. It is a threat to the people of this country. Those people stay in those areas are Kenyans too. They require services. They require protection just like any other Kenyan in whatever part of they are. So for me, I think the most important thing is the step that the president has taken. Sending a powerful delegation, Matiang'i and Monica, they are there to represent the interest, not of the president alone, but the interest of Kenya as appointed executive, as part of the executive. So when we get to the real issues that we are fighting, or because when Nairobi speaks and Somalia speaks, we must come to an understanding, and that understanding must be to the interest of both countries, not Kenya, not Somalia alone. Because remember, in Kenya alone, and I said it, in Kenya alone, we have got the Kenyan Somali and then Somali. How are we going to now start saying these are Kenyans, these are not Kenyans, these are half Kenyans, these are half Somali? We cannot say that. Okay. But what identifies a Kenyan is one, the national identity and the geographical regions. If that is mapped and we know it is the truth, then we must protect anyone within those geographic boundaries, because that is the oath that the President of Kenya took to protect the people of Kenya.
Dennis, I want us to talk about solutions because you've spoken about the problems as far as this region is concerned. Very quickly, before we move to the economy, looking at it, how do we make that northeastern front feel like part of Kenya? Because you've heard them say it severally, Ukienda Kenya. You can see they definitely feel they're not part of us. We've put the equalization fund. It's not, working as we envisaged. Devolution should have brought that as well. Clearly, it has its benefits, but still not quite. What needs to be done so that as we move forward, they can also feel part of this great republic?
Oh, thank you very much. The truth of the fact is that Kenya and Somalia have been involved in what it is that you call a territorial dispute for a long time, all the way from independence. The secession vote that happened that was failed. So this has been a matter that has been underlying for a very long time. And, this has challenged our territorial waters, our land territory as a nation. You know that currently we have an existing territorial dispute with Somalia. And out of that, that has not only caused geopolitical instability, but has caused grave political tension. But not just that, President Farmajo has used that to leverage his political campaign to look as though he's a strong man, yet he hasn't delivered for Somalia. That we need to be very clear. Now, there are several conflict resolution strategies when you talk about international relations.
Let's do two before we move on.
The two of them, of course, what Kenya is doing, is you can either avoid defeat, you can compromise, you can negotiate. The fact is that as Kenya, we need to see, do we have a compromise that we can put through? Can we avoid war? Or do we want to defeat Somalia and declare war the way they've declared war? But the truth of the fact is that there's a deep clanism issue within northern Kenya. And that clanism, they feel much more aligned to Somalia than to Kenya. So when it comes to, sort of relations that you feel have blood ties with you, and so if you feel that you're more Ethiopia than Kenya, how then can we help you? And I think that we need to come with a way that we can see how do we integrate these people socially, because that then has been the gravest issue, that they felt to be much more inclined. Because truly, if it's an economic issue, then we need to look at how much, because we're talking about several counties. We're not talking about one county. How much money have we, as me as a taxpayer, pumped into devolution that now those people, they can't claim that they are economically marginalized. So this has more to do with clanism, geopolitical issues that has been there for years, and the current land territory and water territory tiff that we have in Somalia. And I think President Farmajo needs to rethink his strategy. Otherwise, then Kenya should take the way of defeat and then perhaps not compromise.
Okay, we'll see what the talks that transpired over the weekend will bring as far as the relations are concerned. And also, keep a keen eye on the ICJ as that case is heard later on in this year, in June. We'll be following that very keenly. But as we wind up with our last story for today, I want us to move to page 6 of our Daily Nation. It's all about matters economy. Dicey situation, the Daily Nation says the country is now depending on diaspora remittance as its biggest source of dollar. Tough times, it goes on to say, why Kenya's economy is down on its knees, rising inflation, declining exports, joblessness among factors to blame. When you look at it, they're giving the figures right there. They're pulling down Kenya's overall growth projections for 2019 to 5.6% from 6.2%. And even as we move forward, what you're hearing more, Fred, is more political rhetoric. And we're not talking about these particular issues. Because every single day, yes, you'll have a BBI rally, but when you talk to the people there, they're talking about jobs. They're talking about businesses being closed down. That's not being addressed right now.
The question is BBI addressing, I think the best question is BBI addressing the jobs? Is BBI addressing the unemployment and the underemployment? Is BBI addressing the issues of insecurity? Is BBI addressing the issues of cohesion? If you ask me, I'll say yes. Now, this country, we have had a problem of unemployment for the longest. Every politician who comes on the stage will use that as a campaign tool, as a promise to deliver to the unemployed, who, unfortunately, majority are the young people between the age of 18 to 45, underemployed or unemployed. So it is good we are talking about it, but look at what how the economy is doing today. The economy is doing so bad. Today, out of every 3 properties, 1 of them is under auction. It means we are not able to sustain the loans. It means we are not able to sustain ourselves. It means everything is bad. But how do we fix it? We can only fix it through a constitutional change and getting the right leadership. Because if we are going to put money into the pockets of the common man, the best thing that we must do is to industrialize. How do we industrialize? We industrialize not from tops up, bottoms up. Because that is how we empower the Kenyan people. We take more resources to where the people are. The people of Kenya are in the villages and the wards. And we use those units as the primary units of accelerated development. Therefore, money will be there. And then we don't need to have this issue of rural-urban migration. You industrialize your area. That is creating jobs. And I want to believe that anyone who is talking about constitutional amendment must first think about that. Number 2, we also have to look at why are we suffering now and our leaders are talking about power. We are doing that because we have not come out as people of Kenya to tell them that this is what we want. When you go into a rally and you are ferried and you sit there and you are told this is what is good for you, you must also come out and say, no, this is what is good for me, this is not what is good for me. What is good for the people of Kenya is not only jobs. What is good for the people of Kenya is how do you put money in their pocket through industrialization so that you create jobs that are sustainable. You don't create jobs that are not sustainable. Lastly, matters economy are very broad. When the GDP of a country grows, the indicators are not just job creation. The indicators are also politics of the day. So we cannot run away from politics. Good politics, growth of GDP. Bad politics, decline in the GDP. So today, we must accept that the first step that has been taken to speak the truth about our country in terms of our constitutional reforms is the true step towards fixing most of these issues that we are having.
I want to bring Justice in on this as well, because Frederick is saying that we can reform our constitution to a better economy. Do you believe?
It is a lie that we can use our legal framework to create jobs. In fact, to be honest, the 2010 Constitution is one of the most progressive constitutions you can get, most regionally and in fact globally. That this is one of the most. And the implementation of the Constitution has been our undoing. And in fact, to me, when I see young people, you know, singing and dancing in rallies demanding for jobs for the grandfathers, is the paradox of our time. That we go and sing in rallies to demand jobs few or three positions for the grandfathers of our time. While the same people are dancing and demanding for jobs for the grandfathers of the day are themselves unemployed, but have got the papers and have got the experience and have got the education to be given positions. What has bedeviled this country is, to me, the challenge of the mega projects. Most, I do not think that as a country we needed to have spent almost 400 billion for one single, vis-a-vis our economy. When you look at a 1 trillion, a 1.2 trillion economy, and that economy spending 400 billion, look, I mean, there is no other country that has ever spent almost 30% of its GDP on one project. And today, again, I know there is one other mega project coming up of around 60 billion. I think there is a highway. To me, the mega project has been the undoing of our country, because we need the money, like my brother said, in the grassroots. You cannot do it if you're spending on one single project in Nairobi or wherever at the tune of 100 billion, 200 billion, 300 billion. To me, I think the country, we must begin to go back to the drawing board and say, what do we need to do? Okay. We need to go slow on the mega projects, and we need to now begin to say, we have got 47 counties. How do we ensure that at the end of the day, we have got a project that is able to then regenerate itself and then be able to create jobs at machinery? Because at the end of the day, as I said, BBI is not going to be panacea. It's not going to be the cure to joblessness. Giving jobs to 3 old men or 5 or 6 or even 10 or even 40 at the top, and then leaving millions and millions of Kenyans jobless is not a solution to our problem. So we need to think in terms of go slow on the mega projects and then begin to go down, and then yes. So to me, that is the way forward.
Dennis, we've looked at this particular scenario. We've spoken about these numbers over and over again. We are still having the second phase of the SGR going to Suswa. Some people say it is the train to nowhere. But yet, we're going to spend that money. We have the debts now creeping in on us. We have to pay our debt obligations. And even when they get advice from the Parliamentary Budget Office being told we shouldn't take all of this debt, it's just going to ruin the economy, but we still move forward in this particular direction. How do we hit reset now?
Jeff, that's a very, very important question. And as a political risk advisor, one of the things that investors look at is your political risk index, short-term and long-term, and your economic risk index, short-term and long-term. And currently, Kenya has been scored at above 50 in terms of risk. And we have ticked all the 6 boxes of the types of political risks that would actually cause the country to experience a stagnant inflation, stagflation. And for the economy to be stagnant and on a downward trend. One of it, if you look at it, are basically trade barriers. Are our tariffs comfortable for investors to come? Is there a decline in terms of profitability? Is there currency flows within the masses? Do the masses now have more spending power or less spending power? So if you want to come and put a business in Kenya, is it a favorable environment in terms of even your tariffs or not? The second one is taxes. And we have complex tax rules in this country. A huge economy, a huge burden to the SMEs. The third one is legislation. If you look at our legislation at the end of the day, compliance for business, the compliance cost. You have to pay national government, you have to pay county government, you have to do X, Y, Z. Just even starting a business in this country is a nightmare. The fourth one, of course, is administrative bottlenecks. Kenya is said to be the corruption of heaven. For you, we have had many businesses, and I have worked with investors who have actually taken their businesses to Ethiopia and other countries because they wanted to put businesses locally, and they were asked of bribes and bribes and bribes and many of those things. The fifth one, which currently BBI has seriously propagated, is the political instability. And also we're going through terrorism, we're going through issues of insurrection in coast. You're seeing separatist conversations. The Northern Frontier District movement is resurging. And then the last one is basically the economic aspect. The interest rates discourse that Parliament has been unable to do, that the judiciary has been able to adjudicate. The executive is seen as the aggressor towards this. All the 6 boxes of the types of political risk have been ticked. So if you look at the economic well-being of this country, unless you work on these 6 aspects, then the economy will continue to struggle and struggle and struggle. The opportunity right now is for the president to suspend BBI and start looking at these 6 risks critically to resuscitate the micro and socio-economics of the people. Otherwise, your political risk is going to shoot all the way to 60 and 70%, and you'll be unattractive even to the World Bank and other organizations. So Kenya is trending on a very tightrope, and this tightrope needs to be loosened. And the president has the last word.
Okay, before we have our last word will actually be on the 2/3 gender rule, and yesterday being International Women's Day, but we also have Nerima here as well. I want you to deal with this two-pronged. First of all, as an advocate of the youth, you've been interacting with them, and you've seen the other ones complaining and bearing the brunt of this unemployment. Let's start with that very quickly on your take on this particular scenario. How do you get the jobs back? How do you get the jobs in the first place?
There's a lot of talk about youth starting their own businesses, but that's another conversation in itself, because even if they have access to capital, it's difficult to start your own business, and not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. But the government has had 2 initiatives roll out. The one on public service opportunities, where a report was recently launched where they spent about 800 million on 5,000 interns. Again, there were a lot of problems within that, because we had some interns not being paid at all, and some being paid about 75,000 a month to intern. So we're seeing again the issues that we have within our government in the aspect of lack of accountability, in the aspect of intake problems, and also we have the issue as pertaining to favoritism and tribalism also in the selection process. We should be concerned, because after an intern is done after 1 year, they still don't have a job. So there you are, giving people opportunities for a short period of time, no access still, because we still have a problem of taking over. But also, there's the issue on the other Ajira project that they have, which is online. So here we are encouraging youth to start online businesses, but we're not talking about how they'll have access to the internet. It's not free. You need a job to have access to the internet resources. We don't have spaces that have free Wi-Fi opportunities. We don't have spaces that provide you with computers. Not every young person has access to a laptop. Again, confusion in terms of how do we transition to employment. So what I'm trying to say is our government is grappling with understanding youth right now. As much as we need to look at opportunities innovatively, there still needs to be a conducive environment for those young people. So there needs to be even more engagement with those like us who are within the civil society sector that understand the youth space. The government that hardly engages people like that.
We have 2 minutes on this, so I want us to have 30 seconds each, and we'll wind up with yesterday. It was International Women's Day. I hope you all wished yours and a very good and a very happy Women's Day. But on the 2/3 gender rule, if there's a bill that has failed a record number of times in the House, it's been that one. There have been calls from the top all the way down. It hasn't worked. In 30 seconds, how do you move forward? It's become a very good phrase and call to action, but no follow through. 30 seconds, Fred.
It's a principle. Not more than 2/3 of any elective or appointive body shall be of the same gender. That principle is constitutional principle. There's no two way about it. It must be achieved whichever way it shall be achieved.
Okay. Dennis, your take on
I think one of the things that the men in power have fooled themselves is that this is a woman issue. But the LSK elections showed us otherwise. Now it's the men who are on the receiving end, because the entire elective posts, almost 95% of them are women. So in the near future, it is the men who will be on the receiving end. And I think there has to be political will on this, because it is neither a woman or a man issue. This is about balancing a power and making sure that it's not disproportionate. Okay. So it's absolutely vital.
Okay.
For me, I think it was not the right thing to legislate on matters to do with elective positions. It's proper appointive position, excellent. Elective, not even the first world has ever legislated on matters to do with elections, on elective positions. So I think we would rather have a fund for women to then maybe assist them in terms of running for elective positions, but then it's the proper thing to do when it comes to appointive positions. So that again, we do not, otherwise this is what we would call guided democracy. If we then insist that you must elect? How do you insist that the electorate then elect 1/3? Then that is more a guided democracy. I would rather we give them, we have a fund, a sufficient fund to then be able to facilitate the women to run for these elective positions.
Nerima, you're the woman at the table.
Yeah, it's not even 2/3. This table is not even 2/3. It has failed. But I think it needs to be implemented. It's important to implement just for the general good of the society, and our government has failed in not implementing the 2/3 gender rule.
Okay, we leave it at that as far as is concerned this morning. Thank you so much for making time. As always, Frederick Okango, thank you so much for making time this morning. Dennis Tumbi, for the first time, Justice Mena, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Hope you'll see you plenty more on the show.
Yes.
And final, of course, Nerima Wako. Thank you so much for that. We're going to take a short break. We're back on the other side as we get interactive. This is K24 This Morning.